I want to open this to explain what you're looking at here. The slate that you're seeing on screen, this is it. Reason is that my camera is not working out right now. It's having issues that I caused. I admit I made a mistake. I can still film, but it's filming by braille. Easiest way to put it. So the end result is that filming normal shows is going to be difficult at best. So what I'm going to try this for a couple of episodes. I'm going to try the lecture type format. If you like it, I'll keep doing it. If you don't like it, bear with me for a couple weeks. We will go back to normal programming as soon as I can get a new camera. Pretty basic. So I just want to put that out there. And also, I should mention, this is my opinion. I'm going to try to back up everything that I'm saying here. And there will be links on the YouTube page referencing specific things. I wanted to put a whole bunch of pictures. I wanted to do the slideshow thing, but that ran into a big problem of copyright. And YouTube has a very, very, very bad history towards fair use. They don't seem to... They lean more towards the cover your butt aspect of things. So I was trying to get permissions, which is very impossible to do when you're a small-time producer. And I kind of hemmed and hawed, and that's why I was kind of stalling on a lot of this stuff. That and the controversy, I really wasn't looking forward to that. But that's what was stalling me on that. But I figured, now's a good time as any. So I will reference everything that I say. I will have links to everything. Although all the information is out there, all you need to do is a simple search and you'll find everything. So with all of that in mind, I do kind of want to talk about DDay and ION. Those are people keep on asking me, you going? And I keep on saying no. And when they press me for information, I keep on saying, yeah, keep meaning to do a show. Let me open up with something that came across my inbox a couple days ago. If you're familiar with, I think it was PB Nation on their Facebook page, they linked to a story about this, but I found it at one of the better sources, minnesotapublicradio.org. Let me read this directly. People pay $325 to reenact the Bin Laden raid. So far, 137 people have signed up to pretend to kill a man wearing a white robe and a fake beard. Now, this leads to the question, would you do this? Would this be something that you would want to do? $325 to go pretend to be on SEAL Team 6, raid a compound, and kill Osama Bin Laden yourself with your own grubby little hands? Would you do that? A lot of paintball players will always say, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. But that actually kind of leads me to where DDay and ION come in. Now, paintball has a long history of having scenario games based on armed conflicts. Wayne Dalek was very infamous for doing all his Vietnam scenario games. Lately, I've been seeing Black Hawk Down, a lot of other modern scenarios like that. Personally, I don't like them, and I do not like the DDay-style scenario games on many, many reasons. I'm going to start with some people are going to say nitpicky, but this actually plays a lot into it. The first thing is that they sell the games as reenactments. Matter of fact, if you go to the NPR, National Public Radio, they do a show called All Things Considered. In 2011, they sent a reporter to go to ION, and the person there said that it was a reenactment. So they're selling this as a reenactment. Okay, so if these games are supposed to be reenactments, or even vaguely based on the events, where they're trying to base themselves into the reality of what happened during Operation Overlord, I don't buy it. Just on this very basis. Let's start with the actual players themselves. Are they reenactors or are they players? And for the most part, understand that I'm speaking in generalities here. I'm not talking about specific people or whatever. Let's talk about your clothing. When you go play paintball, when you see your average person at ION or DDay, what are they wearing? Most of these guys, and again, speaking in generalities, most of these guys are probably wearing camouflage or they're wearing tourney jerseys. One of the two. Now, already, you're off of the reenactors, because in World War II, your normal GI, your US GI, wore OD greens. There was camouflage, but that was only for a select few German units. And I forget exactly what it was called. I want to say it was Flecktarn, but I do not recall that off the top of my head. So already, paintball players are well ahead of the technological curve. Even if you're wearing basic woodland camouflage, you are way beyond what they had during World War II as far as clothing goes. Like I said, most of those guys had OD green. Now, I could get into the ghillies. They had those during World War I and World War II, but those were few and far between. But again, I'm going to overlook this for the most part, because if you were to try to get a replica uniform, full helmet, full belt, full OD greens of the correct style, easily $200 down the drain. Most players aren't going to do this for just something they're going to wear for one paintball event. So let's talk about the armaments instead, because this is something that you're going to be using quite a lot. The average soldier during World War II. The US soldiers used the M1 Garand. It was a semi-automatic 8-round clip. Germans, average soldier mind you, had the G98, which is a bolt-action with a 5-round clip. The absolute highest rate of firepower on the front line, average, I'm talking average, was probably something like the Tommy gun or the MP3, which could kick out 500 to 600 rounds per minute. Now, let's take your average blister pack paintball gun. Your average, going into the store, buying it right and ripping it out of the plastic. You have a 200 round hopper. You can easily get 9 to 10 rounds per second, even out of the most basic blister pack semi-auto. Already, you've just blown the Tommy gun out of the water, as far as rate of fire goes. Your average E-gun can even go faster than that, as we all know. Yeah, you can cap it down, but who caps it down, right? So what I'm getting at here is that the firepower is not even close to what the average soldier had during World War II. We blow them so far out of the water, it's not even funny. And I don't think any players actually would ever restrict themselves to World War II style of rate of fire or ammo capacity. It would be really cool if they did. But I am recalling a game that I played once where they said, oh, we're going to do Civil War tactics. You have to hand feed the balls. So what people were doing was, instead of getting into the spirit of the game, which was supposed to be one ball shoot like they did during the Civil War, people were holding 10 balls in their hand, holding that over the feed neck, and shooting small bursts. This is what we do as paintball players. We push the rules. We have to understand that. So you're not going to get anybody who is going to willingly go out onto the field and just completely hobble themselves with this low rate of fire and low firepower game. And while we're talking about the ammunition, let's talk about the ammo. Actually, ammo, I'm going to overlook this one, at least as far as D-Day goes. It goes on record, a lot of guys during D-Day, the invasion force I should say, they were stuffing their pockets with as much ammunition as they could carry. And I don't blame them either, because during World War II, during that time, they didn't know when the reinforcements were arriving. For all they knew, they were going to be out in the middle of this place for a month, maybe 2 months. They didn't know. So they loaded for bear, because you have to, especially under situations like that. Some other tech. Let's talk about the walkie-talkie. And if I just made you cringe, then you're far ahead than just about any other paintball player that I can think of. When you talk about walkie-talkies, you're talking in World War II, you're talking about the backpacks. You may have seen pictures of these guys. These are the guys who had the big generator-style backpack that had this almost 10-foot tall, comically long antenna on the back of it. Those things had a 3-mile range, which at the time was incredible. They also had the handy-talkies. These are the ones that look like the old cell phone, the old brick cell phones. You might have seen pictures of those too. Those had a 1-mile range. They were good for communicating between units, but there's no way you're going to be able to get back to base camp with that. Compared to a modern FRS radio, which has far more security and so much more flexibility and range, again, we are way ahead of the curve on that. And if you show up to ION or D-Day, I guarantee you that anybody who has a radio is probably going to be having an FRS radio and nothing similar to the World War II walkie-talkies. So let me recap this real quick. The gear. Paintball player walks out with gear that is just leaps and bounds beyond what the average World War II soldier had access to, let alone what they used on the field, come to think of it. Now, the participants in these games, they also don't look like World War II soldiers, and I would be willing to bet you most of them don't know the history of what they're supposed to be reenacting. Matter of fact, let me read this from the National Public Radio article about D-Day 2011. Quote, once the game starts, there's less emphasis on a historical accuracy, says Allied General John Holm, aka Mad Cow, a veteran of the Persian Gulf War. A lot of people are going to come here and they're going to expect a reenactment, but I think there's a lot of components about this that really don't make this a war reenactment at all, Holmes says. So I think we can safely say that these are not reenactors, that these are game players. These are, I hate to say gamers, but that's what they are. So if it's not a reenactment, then what is D-Day selling itself on? Why is it calling itself D-Day? I mean, why choose D-Day? Why choose this particular battle? Why choose this area of sand during World War II? I can kind of answer that one too. It's because D-Day was decisive. It was seen as kind of the beginning of the end move of the European theater of World War II. And it's been glorified. How many movies have come out glorifying the D-Day invasion? I'm not much of a movie watcher. You guys probably named dozens more than I could. And arguably we won. Arguably we won the American way. We pounded through the middle like cowboys and didn't bother using diplomacy. Oh yeah, we used diplomacy at the end of a gun. But that's how we did it. We won that one. Oh yeah, we took it to them, right? Well, here's the question. The fact that we won this, is that really the selling point? That we're reenacting a battle that we won? And I think that's probably why people want to relive it. You don't see very many scenario games based on Dunkirk, is what I'm getting at here. So why don't we choose any of the Pacific Theater battles? I mean, there's a lot of Pacific Theater battles to choose from, a lot of ground fights. Even if we just concentrate on the end battles, Saipan, Philippines, Iwo Jima, Borneo, Okinawa, we could do those. Why don't we? Why isn't the big event of the summer that? Well, that's because when we defeated Japan, we won through diplomacy. Not a very sexy way to win, at least through the modern lens. But there's actually one really big thing that bothers me, and it's something I just cannot ignore. And this comes from the NPR article. Again, NPR talking about ION 2011. According to the NPR coverage of the 2011 event of ION, they wanted to, quote, make it historically accurate, like using the names of French towns on the playing field, like Saint-Marie-Autrey. I'm not even going to try. I can't speak French. I'm an American. Can't do it. But they used the names of French towns. However, and along the point they're trying to do is they want to make it historically accurate. Okay. However, in both the rules for D-Day and in ION, they just purge some of the more embarrassing historical facts. If you go to the rules for 2011 D-Day, from the 2011 rules it says, quote, out of respect for our friends in Germany, the use or display of the German national flag will not be allowed unless you are a German national citizen. Swastikas in any form are absolutely forbidden. And we can also go to the NPR article from ION 2011, quote, Skirmish USA, the owner of the field, bans Nazi paraphernalia. But that didn't stop Nick Woo Dog Woodrum, who drove up from West Virginia. Woodrum shaved the Nazi SS insignia onto one side of his head and a swastika on the other. It's all character, it's all fun and games, no hate, Woodrum says. Earlier, he had a swastika flag flying over his tent site, but was asked to take it down. Quote, I did it out of respect, but it's like having a Civil War reenactment without the Confederate flags. It don't make no sense, he says. James Armentrout, who plays an Allied officer, says rule breakers are inevitable. With 4,100 people, you're going to have a few bad eggs. We try to minimize them as best we can, he says. And now I'm off of the article from NPR. I really recommend you go to the National Public Radio website and listen to the article. It's printed and they have a nice audio about it. It's under All Things Considered. But this is what gets me. It's perfectly okay if you want to dress up in U.S. gear. You want to wear the U.S. Army uniform from the 1940s, you can. You want to put the spade on your helmet, that's cool. You want to wear the OD greens, that's fine. You want to wear historically accurate boots, that's cool too. But you're not allowed to dress up as a German soldier in a World War II scenario game. Alright, let's talk a little bit about the symbols itself. Now, the Nazi symbols are nothing new in paintball. Just in my area alone, there's one team down south of me called Cyanide Syndicate. They call themselves a scenario team. The back of their jerseys has a stylized SS logo. And even though they're going to argue that, no, it doesn't look anything like the German, yes, it does. Don't argue me on this one, guys. There used to be a team up here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, heartland of America. They used to have SS symbols and swastikas on their uniforms. They used to show up to big games wearing World War II style uniforms. They would give themselves Sieg Heils. They would play World War II German band music. I remember a couple friends of mine who visited from the UK. They came over to me in the middle of the day and said, "What is their problem?" I said, "What are you talking about?" They said, "We are 2 steps away from walking over there and beating I'm not going to exactly repeat what they said, but they were ready to come to blows. They were ready to punch these guys in the face." I can also point you to a video from a paintball team called Slightly Intoxicated. SI Propaganda. Look it up. They have a variant of the SS logo. It's SI with a little death's head on it. They also completely bathe themselves in the World War II iconography. They wear German helmets. They wear the German-style camouflage jackets. Everything. And I can even point at D-Day itself. Many teams try to circumvent this rule by going World War I. They used to. They don't probably do it anymore because the German flag rule. But they used to have the World War I German flag. They would wear World War I insignia. And they did it because they wanted to at least show, hey, we're on the German side. Now, I haven't exactly gone to these websites and said, well, why don't you do this? Because that's just flame bait. That's just asking for it. Although I think I know why. Part of it's political correctness, and a part of it I seriously think is no better than people who are revisionist historians. They're basically banning the symbols in a game that wraps itself in every other part of World War II. Cleaning it up a little bit. That's a little messy. No, we're just going to ignore that. You just cannot choose to remember the parts of history you prefer and just ignore the rest. You got to remember it all. Even the ugly parts, even the parts you do not like. Now, more disturbing to me, by revising the history, by ignoring these historical parts, I feel that they are sanitizing the entire event and its importance. Now I get to start listing off numbers. I actually found a really interesting website that had a lot of numbers on it for how many casualties there were. Now, when you're talking about casualties, you're not talking about people killed in action. You're talking about people who were killed and or incapacitated. And that could be, severely wounded, can no longer fight. And let me read this directly from this one particular website. The U.S. National D-Day Memorial Foundation checked all the Allied troops that were killed on the 6th of June, 1944, during Operation Overlord. It has been confirmed that 2,499 Americans were killed on D-Day and 1,915 of the other Allied nations, for a total of 4,414 dead. 4,414 dead. A report from Erwin Rommel himself, end of June, speaks of the losses from that month as 28 generals, 345 commanding officers, and about 250,000 men. But that kind of loses its meaning, doesn't it? It's just numbers. You don't really get the impact of what that is. And I could come up with all sorts of, you could fill this many football stadiums with that many people, but that's not really important here. All of this destined destruction, though, is just over an ideal and stopping that. And I mean, we can get into a fun discussion from here, but I really don't want to lose the focus here. I'm already wandering enough as it is. But I just can't ignore it. And it might be nitpicky, but it's important to me. All these people died over an idea. and all the ground soldiers, and I keep on hearing people say this, well, the soldiers are just following orders. They didn't know what was going on, but we do. We know the history, we know the atrocities, we know the motivations and ideals from the Germans, the higher-ups, and the people. And yet you have all these Americans who are just very happy to win games for the Axis. Actually, that brings me to a very interesting PR nightmare. Now, a couple of you guys might remember Inside Edition a couple weeks ago. They decided to drag paintball through the mud, saying that paintball was the actual cause, or one of them, for those theater shootings. Imagine if they came to D-Day and filmed a whole bunch of guys playing as Germans, and the Germans win the event. They then re-edit the footage and say that they're a bunch of young Americans pretending to be German Nazi soldiers, rewriting history. I can see it. And if that doesn't make you cringe, I don't know what will. I just see this as a potential PR nightmare. And this actually brings me to the point of, these games are just elaborate what-ifs. They're not reenactments. It's almost a parody of the real events, when in reality, we know what happened. We know what the Germans were fighting for. We know what the higher-ups wanted. We can't use the excuse of, well, we're just playing the soldiers on the ground and they were just following orders. That's not going to fly if somebody like Inside Edition decides to come in and just trash us. They're going to use that against us. And we didn't even go back to the revisionist history. Well, we don't allow the Nazi symbols, so it's not that. No, the Nazi symbols offend people, so we're just going to remove it. By doing that, you're basically removing all acknowledgement to everything that happened during World War II. The whole reason that World War II was even fought. It's not just about removing the symbols, because that's superficial. You're still naming your event D-Day. You're still in World War II. So what are you also going to just remove? Let's just remove the whole Holocaust thing. That didn't happen, right? A bunch of politicians don't think it happened. How about the war crimes, the suffering? Nope. We can just ignore that too. This is probably why we don't have any Pacific Theater scenario games, because then we'd have to kind of acknowledge that the U.S. government had locked up thousands of Japanese American citizens under the name of security. Kind of been a little embarrassing for America. Just saying. One thing I find is that we prefer the history we think we know over the history that actually happened. I want to state this again from the NPR article from Nick Woodrum, when he said, "I did it out of respect. It's like having a Civil War reenactment without the Confederate flags that don't make no sense." I have to agree with that. If you're going to have your game based in World War II, have your game based in World War II. Don't just go over the good parts. Let's go back to the beginning. The Bin Laden scenario thing. I can almost liken that to just being fantasy camp for football, or for combat. Because you got football scenario, you got football camps, you've got baseball camps. Actually, I've got the baseball camp page here. One of them, there's every major league team seems to have one of these things. It's $4,000, $4,000 for a week of fantasy camp. You get a uniform, you get to meet some old pros, you get to play a bunch of baseball. They teach you how to play a little bit, and you have to be over 30 years old to attend this particular one. I would link to one of them, but they're all the same. They all pretty much work the same way. It's fantasy camp. You're pretending to be a baseball player for a week, paying $4,000 to do it. In this case, you're paying $325 to pretend to be a Navy SEAL, and to pretend to take part in one of the more pivotal things that have happened in recent history. It's fantasy camp. D-Day feels the same way. So how about this as a question for you? Would D-Day or ION attract just as many people as it would if it were Mars versus Venus? How about red versus green? No, of course not. That doesn't trip the fantasy, does it? That doesn't have that emotional punch, right? I mean, we won D-Day. We won. That makes it cool. That makes me want to go there because I want to reenact the thing that we won. America won this 70 years ago, but we won it. We are insulated from the real event, it's lost meaning. If you ever had the chance to travel abroad, I highly recommend it. I went to London twice in my life, and the last time I was there, I walked around downtown London, and I would look up, and on several of the buildings, you could actually see big gouges taken off the side of the building. And I'm not talking about small scrapes, I'm talking about huge gouges taken out of the brickwork. And those are left over from the bombings during World War II. Matter of fact, if you were to walk around the English countryside long enough, you might find an unexploded munition from World War II. They're still out there. They're still finding hand grenades, they're still finding bombs, which is kind of a frightening thought. With the exception of Hawaii, the United States has been fairly safely insulated from any real battle scars of World War II. And as I said, we're 70 years out. Most of the vets are gone. And we've forgotten what it would have been like in the 1940s. There was a sense of desperation for D-Day. It was probably the biggest gut check ever made by a general, by a U.S. president, ever. It's World War II fantasy camp, though. DDay, ION, fantasy camp. We have an arrogance based on their separation of time and distance from the actual event. When people talk about the event, they don't talk about the actual conflict. They brag about getting their kills or how they held this one position, but nobody really talks about the guys who were actually on the ground doing it for real in 1944. Although, speaking of 1944, if you really want to hear something, go check on YouTube. There's probably a whole bunch of videos there. I found it on the History Channel. But look up the speech that Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower gave to his Allied Expeditionary Force, June 5th, 1944. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but one of the paragraphs near the end is, quote, "I have full confidence in your courage and devotion to duty and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory." What you don't know is that Dwight D. Eisenhower had another speech. He kept it in his pocket. This was that speech is actually in the National Archives. Quote, "Our landings have failed and I have withdrawn the troops. My decision to attack at this time and place was based on the best information available. The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone." And accidentally he labeled it as July 5th instead of June. But considering all the stuff that was on his mind, I don't blame him. Fortunately, he never had to read that publicly. But that was the mindset going into Operation Overlord. They had no idea. I don't think my generation can really fathom this kind of planning. As I said before, it was all or nothing gamble. They felt the world was on the line, and in a way, I think that's why people flock to games like DDay and ION. They're trying to grasp at history. But I don't see it that way. I don't see DDay or ION-style games as anything more than a vulgar display of the bravery of thousands of young men asked to do the impossible. It's a parody. People will disagree with me, and that's fine, but people keep asking me if I'm going, and my answer is going to continue to be no. I do want to kind of put this out there, though. I have been to one World War II scenario game. It was a small one at a local field. It was a company that was doing around the country several games, and this one happened to be Battle of Bocage. Bocage, we'll go with that. And the one thing that I remember about this game, the event director kept on pulling back the Germans. The German team kept on telling them, you have to fall back, you have to fall back. There was no reason for them to do so. The German team consisted mostly of hardcore scenario guys who stuck together and knew the format and knew everything. The Allied team consisted mostly of locals who had no idea how to play scenario games. There was no reason for the Germans to keep pulling back except for this is how it historically happened. It was a slap to the face, quite honestly, because this was the scenario director saying, okay, yeah, well, you guys should be at this checkpoint by now. We're going to pull back the Germans so that you guys can actually do this mission and you guys can actually be there at this time. And it's just a slap to the face. Between that and his attitude to like game balance and safety, most of us didn't come back for day 2. But that's the other side of the coin. If you sell us a game, but you're giving us an inaccurate reenactment. I mean, if we had earned the advances, if we had earned every inch of ground that we took, that'd have been a different story. But we didn't. So again, it becomes parody. So my overall opinion, let's just call it what it is. It's a big game. It really has nothing to do with the events of Operation Overlord, other than using the names of the real places and events. And to me, it seems like it's just cashing in on the name. It's a marketing pitch. Which is why I really don't see myself going to either event anytime in the foreseeable future. Now, some of you are going to disagree with me, but this is the core of my argument. And a part of me wants to put a lampshade on this, because a lot of people are going to say, well, it's just a game. Why are you getting so uppity? It's just a game. Well, yeah, it's just a game. But it's a game trying to sell itself on actual events and give people the arrogance to think that they could have been there and they could have changed how things came out. And I think that's what I find the most offensive about it. And on that, we're going to call this one a lecture. Thank you guys for listening and staying tuned. I know this has been a long video. If you like it, comment down below, and we'll see what happens.